This is the Gator, the big boss with the big hot sauce, the man with the plan to let you know you're watching Abington News and Views with my man Pots and Pans. Don't touch that dial.
Hello, welcome to a special segment of Abington News and Views. I'm Ed Boyd, and today with us we have a Glenside resident, a former Marine, a former Abington commissioner, president of his own publishing company, Seniram Publishing. He's had 5.5 million words published with 10 books, and his latest will come out later this summer on the War of 1812. Abington's own Bud Hannings, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ed. It's good to be here.
Bud, talk to me a little bit, set us up a little bit. I mean, obviously you've got an extensive library here. What was it when you were younger that put you in a position where you'd be ready to tackle this amazing task?
It's almost a cliche, I guess, but if you were in Philadelphia and were privileged to go to a Catholic school, you were pretty much automatically patriotic, and it just went from there. You know, you didn't have any of this liberal nonsense. You had the nuns with the yardstick, and it worked well. My first experience with the military was probably about 1951, when I was a young lad, many years ago. And these Korean guys were en route to Korea, but they stopped in North Philadelphia. And while they were there for 2 or 3 days, we got to know them. And I was one of the luckier kids that got a chance to meet some of them and run to the store. But I never forgot that little excursion and often wondered how many of them ever got back home.
And how many of their stories were told.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, right.
What exactly, you were a former Marine. How did that inspire you? What experience did you bring from being a Marine that reflects in the books that you've written?
Facts, not fiction.
Okay.
And my only combat was in Abington, not in the Marine Corps, and my only foreign duty was Tijuana. So I have no combat record or anything, but that doesn't mean that those who have fought for more than 235 years, excluding the French and Indian War, don't deserve to be honored. And, maybe they say, well, if you weren't there, you can't tell their story. Well, there are exceptions to that rule, and if you're not there, you can tell a much more factual story sometimes.
What was the first publication? What was the one that was the genesis, and what led to that actually taking place?
Well, in 1979, when the Iranians took the American hostages, it dawned on me that the radio stations weren't playing anything patriotic. They didn't have anything. They didn't even have God Bless America readily available. But they were playing the Canadian Gordon Sinclair's An American, or The American, and that was pretty good. And I thought, why in the world do we need a Canadian to make us feel good to be an American? So at the time, we had a little ice cream store in Glenside, pretty much non-profit. I decided to write something, and I wrote a tribute to the hostage situation. And it just went from there. It just, that the Eternal Flag is what it was called, and that's, I guess, what I first wrote professionally.
And you have that publication with us today.
Yeah.
What? You spent some time, obviously, out, not being a Marine. You established a business related to transporting goods from coast to coast. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I worked in the trucking industry all my life. It was a good livelihood. And then when I was about 50, I decided to start my own company. It was a brokerage firm, cross country, and that went well for years. And then things happened, and I had to make a choice. Did I want to start over and start another trucking enterprise, or confine myself to writing? And I chose writing.
Obviously, this was your first inspiration, the Eternal Flag. Did it get published right away?
No, it was a funny story. We gave out approximately 40,000 copies of that through the years, and never charged anyone for that. But I sent a copy of it to a publication in Florida and asked them to consider publishing it. And I got back notification that business was bad, but if someone would order 25 or 50,000 copies, that they would be glad to publish it. So I read the letter and I went through the book, noticed that the only two things in there that belonged to the author was his name and where to send the check. And I said, well, maybe if I buy 50,000 copies, I'll get my tribute published in his book. And I said, it might be a little less expensive to publish my own book on the flag, which is what I started to do.
So you established Seniram at this point?
Not right away. No,
okay.
I decided to write a story of the American flag.
Okay.
And that was way back, 1980, I guess. And it didn't work out too well because I just bumped into too many American heroes, too many to count, too many to remember. And next thing you know, we were writing a book, we being polite. I mean, I had plenty of help, but not, just friends. So about 10 years later, my first book got published, A Portrait of the Stars and Stripes. And we went from there. That covered from the 1770s through the end of World War I. And that's how it started. So,
in our next segment, we're going to get into more detail about the books. But at this point, you were ready to take this on as a full-time venture. But just looking back now, did you ever think that you would get anywhere close to this kind of 5.5 million words published stage? Or
I never gave it any thought. We sent the first book to Simon & Schuster, and it was delivered on their home truck from a distribution center in Riverside, New Jersey, and it went up to them, I think, on a Monday. It was back at my door on Thursday, and the guy said it was terrible because it was promoting patriotism, promoting the U.S. military, and promoting national shrines to visit. And the guy said to me in his letter that 2 out of 3 of them might have been okay, but 3 out of 3 was a terrible decision. So I made a note that if I started my own publishing company, I'd make sure I sent him an application to apply for a job in the mailroom.
And that would set you up for the next several years.
Yeah.
We'll be back in just a second. We're talking with Bud Hannings, author of several military history books, and we'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.